friends, welcome back to my channel. My name's Taylor and I am super excited for this video because it is April and one of my most anticipated releases for this entire year just came out, and that is the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. I have a feeling this is going to be one of my favorite books of the year, so I thought it would be really fun to do a reading vlog and review. I'll have this vlog split up into two different parts. First part is going to be non-spoilery section, just kind of me reading the book, going through it as a reading vlog, and then the last half will be a spoilery discussion part. And I will let you know when spoilers start, so it'll be really easy to avoid those if you want to avoid spoilers, or if you've already read it and want to discuss the book down below, make sure to spoiler tag those comments for people who haven't. But I'd love to discuss this because I have a feeling this is going to be one of my favorite books of the year. Really excited for this one. This really seemed like it would be exactly in my wheelhouse. Vampires are kind of making a comeback this year, and I feel like in the next year as well, there are a lot of really good vampire releases, and I'm really excited about it. As someone who loves Dracula, when I heard Grady Hendrix was writing a book that was, what do they call it? It's Dracula plus Southern Magnolias, I believe. So when I heard that, I was very excited and knew I needed to pick it up. So here is the synopsis of this book. It sounds like such an engaging read. In every book we read, no one ever thought anything bad was happening until it was too late. Patricia Campbell's life has never felt smaller. Her husband is a workaholic. Her teenage kids have their own lives. Her senile mother-in-law needs constant care, and she's always a step behind on her endless to-do list. The only thing keeping her sane is her book club, a close-knit book of Charleston women united by their love of true crime. At these meetings, they're just as likely to talk about the Manson family as they are about their own families. One evening after book club, Patricia is viciously attacked by an elderly neighbor, bringing the neighbor's handsome nephew, James Harris, into her life. James is well-traveled and well-read, and he makes Patricia feel things she hasn't felt in years. But when children on the other side of town go missing, their deaths written off by local police, Patricia has reason to believe James Harris is more of a Bundy than a Brad Pitt. The real problem, James is a monster of a different kind, and Patricia has already invited him in. Little by little, James will insinuate himself into Patricia's life and try and take everything she took for granted, including the book club. She won't surrender without a fight in this blood-soaked tale of neighborly kindness gone wrong. One of the things that I absolutely love about Grady Hendrix's books is that they're like works of art in and of themselves. So much attention is drawn to like just the design of the books. So this one, not only does it have like a very striking cover, I love like this kind of retro looking peach decal with the matte black cover, which is really nice. The book itself is a really pretty lime green. It's got a little library book logo there, and then inside the book, it's really nice peach color kind of going along with the book cover, the dust jacket. And it's got this really nice sort of vintagey, very 80s, early 90s floral in the front covers and throughout. And then I noticed it's separated into sections, and each of the different sections has a title of like a true crime book or just a book having to do with crime. Some of the classic books in here, like Helter Skelter and The Stranger Beside Me. So I'm super excited to delve into this one, and I will give you an update when I've gotten a little bit through the book. So I'm on page 104. I thought that'd be a really good place to stop and kind of talk about my thoughts so far, and that's also like chapter 10. So I've gotten a good chunk of the way through this book. This is a very fast and readable book. Truly, it's only like just under 400 pages, and I definitely feel like if I didn't want to do anything else today, I could just sit down and read this all in one sitting. It's very readable. The characters aren't too likable. I'd say the main character, Patricia, is the most likable out of any of them. But at the same time, they're like fun to read about. So this is taking place, it starts in the late 80s and then goes through the early 90s. You know, Patricia is someone who is very defined by her role within her family. Her husband is a doctor, she was a nurse, that's how they met, and then she gave up her career to raise their children. Now her children are like growing up, starting to need her less. Her husband's like trying to get a promotion at work, so he's not around as much. So she starts this book club with some ladies around town, and they're not the normal respectable women that she normally would kind of associate with. She's very to the book, likes living in society's rules, but lately she's starting to feel like her place in this world's a little bit too small for her. These women that she finds like this kindred spirit with are very much outcasts. Like one is a northern feminist, another one is super shy, another one is like very religious and just kind of out there, a little bit zany, and then another one is this mother of 5 who is very like unconventional in the way she raises her kids. So they're all kind of like outcasts in this southern town, and they all love true crime. So they actually go through month by month and they read either a true crime book or like a darker sort of fiction book. And I'll show you, that's how like this book is split up into segments, which I actually think is like a wonderful little detail. So like in July, they read Anne Rule's The Stranger Beside Me, and that is the heading of that section, and I really love it. I love how, you know, going in, this is a book where you're gonna find a vampire, and I love once you meet this vampire, you as the reader know that he is a vampire, or at least like a not very great person. And I hope that wasn't too spoilery for you guys, but I will say, like, right off the bat, this is a book that is about vampires. They don't kind of tiptoe around it. You know this guy's a vampire, and it's an interesting dynamic because especially these women, I feel like, are going to find out that he's a vampire very soon, or think that something's wrong with him very soon, just because they're all like they all would be murderinos for sure. So I'm interested to see where that goes. It is a Grady Hendrix novel, and in me saying that is, it's a very funny book without trying to be funny. I think just most of the humor in this book comes from observations of other people and just kind of the observations of day-to-day life that anyone can relate to. There's no forced humor in here. It's just observational humor, and it's so funny, and I just really love that because his books are very, at least I feel like if you read a ton of horror, they're not going to keep you up at night, but they are like really clever, well done horror premises for the most part. I mean, I think there are some scenes that are definitely horrifying, but for the most part, I feel like it's just like a love of the genre and just entertaining fun, and that's what I'm really loving about this book. It's a lot of fun, and even though it is a vampire book, it's a fun vampire book, and that's exactly like what I need right now to be reading. Is just fun, lighthearted reads. So yeah, I am excited. I guess I should say possible trigger warnings so far for graphic violence. I'm not sure how graphic it's going to get. There was something that happened in the first couple of chapters that was described in terms of the human body in sort of like body horror sort of way. It didn't really bother me, but I want to put it on your radar. I do think, especially, I mean, in terms of vampires, if you think of how they bite people and attack people, I feel like, you know, just the amount of description going into that, I know I can get skeeved out if I'm thinking about vampires and blood sucking is, you know, so I think there's going to be descriptions of that. So maybe trigger warning for mild body horror. Other than that, there hasn't really been anything in here that I would caution people against. So yeah, highly enjoying it. And I think I will read like another 100 pages before I give another update. I think it's going to be very hard to kind of keep on giving these updates with, one, not like speeding through the whole rest of the book, and then two, not giving spoilers, because this is a very character-driven book, I feel like. And I hesitate to say that because it is only like a quarter of the way through the book, but I feel like a lot of the premise is given in the dust jacket, and I feel like you're more exploring the way characters react to the situation rather than the situation itself being like twisty and turny and surprising. I'm sure there's going to be a couple twists and turns because it's Grady Hendrix. Usually throws at least one in there. I am absolutely loving this so far. Doing another check-in today. I am around the 200 page mark. I believe I am on page 192. The stakes have risen, pun not intended. I am still really loving this book. This is probably going up there as possibly my favorite Grady Hendrix novel, but I haven't read We Sold Our Souls yet, so I can't really make a definitive declaration on that, but this is really awesome. It has gotten a little bit eerier, a little bit spookier. I think I kind of psyched myself out. I know it's still not the most horrifying book that I've ever read, but you know, maybe you don't want to read it right before bed. You might get a little creeped out, who knows? But this is really good, and the stakes have gotten higher, and there's a lot more body horror, and I feel like in this book I've noticed several nods to Stephen King already, just with certain aspects, and we'll talk about that later in like the spoilery section. But I will say one of like the characters is reading Salem's Lot in here, which is very appropriate because this is about vampires. Salem's Lot is about vampires as well, so that was pretty cool. I do think this is kind of this kind of tackles some darker topics, or it's tackling some darker topics so far. Not that vampires aren't dark, but like real world explorations of things, kind of hidden in horror, which I love horror for doing that as a genre. Kids are going missing from underprivileged areas, and it's kind of talking about how the media is not even discussing it at all, just because these children, and we see this in real life, the types of missing persons cases and the types of missing children, and the types of missing women in particular, that the ones that get a lot of national attention and media attention, and the ones that we still theorize about and speculate about, and that like true crime and everyone kind of still talks about years and years and years later. Whereas there are some other true crime cases, there are some other missing persons, murdered persons, abductions, stuff like that. If you are not conventionally very pretty, blonde, white, you're not going to get as much media attention, and that's real thing. Statistically, you're not going to get as much media attention. So it's kind of going into this. The kids that are disappearing are from an underprivileged neighborhood, and the white protagonist in here, she doesn't believe it at first because she's like, I would have heard about it on the news, but it's actually her mother-in-law's housekeeper. Her mother-in-law has dementia, and they have a housekeeper kind of come and take care of her when they can't, and the housekeeper is a woman of color, and she brings up this plight to our main character, talking about these children that are going missing, and the police don't really care, and there's not really media attention being brought to it because some of these kids have been in situations where they're considered runaways, where they're considered, you know, kids that just, you know, got into drugs or something and ran off or something like that, which is something that happens in real life to children. I'm not saying the vampire part, obviously, but a lot of missing persons cases, especially people who aren't like the JonBenet Ramseys or the Maura Murrays, you don't get as much media attention, and people are more likely to say, oh, she's probably a runaway, or oh, you know, she left of her own accord, rather than she's abducted or she's a missing person. So that's being tackled in here as well. I'm hoping to finish this today. I would really like to, and it's not like I have anything else to do, honestly. That's just the mood of April 2020, so we'll see. So yeah, I'm gonna read like 100 more pages and then check back in with you guys, or perhaps I might just finish the whole thing, who knows. I am absolutely devouring this book. It's been a couple of days. I've had plenty of time to digest my thoughts on this book. I finished it. I absolutely loved it. The ending was very emotional. And overall, I will say before getting into the spoilers, I absolutely do recommend this book. I think this is a great jumping off point if you're new to Grady Hendrix, and it's also just an amazing addition to his backlog work if you have read his work before. I know that maybe getting new books might be a little bit tricky right now, but if you do have a library card, it is on the Libby app. You will have to wait a little bit, but I know they are really good with new releases about sometimes giving you like lucky day, 7-day holds, stuff like that. So you should be able to hopefully get your hands on this if you can't afford to purchase it right now, or if you're waiting for like an indie bookstore to open up, or if you're just looking to rent it. You can do all those as well. Getting into the spoilery part of this, it has been a while since I have picked up a horror book. I think it's probably been early February, since, you know, the world is a little bit of a horror story right now, and I've been really prioritizing like lighter reads, and horror hasn't really been too high on my list because I have really just wanted to be uplifted by like the content that I was consuming to kind of distract me from the real world. So this was the first horror book I've picking up in quite a while, and it was a really good first horror book since all this has happened. The reason why I think Grady Hendrix is so popular as an author is because his characters really do feel like characters. They feel like people. One of the most important things to have in horror is characters that you really love and that you want to see succeed and don't want to see foiled by the bad guys. And just he makes such believable and flawed and likable characters that you really want to be on their side. You get nervous for them. You want to see them succeed. So I think that's really great. That was wonderfully done in here. Characterization, amazing. It's also a very funny book, very current book. I mean, I know it is set in the 90s, but it does feel not dated at all. It just has like a really nice little hint of nostalgia without relying on that to carry the book. So that was really good as well. It also kind of touches on some issues that are still relevant today. So I think that kind of helped it feel more like a contemporary novel almost, rather than a book set in the past. This is a very optimistic book. And again, spoilers, the last chance to click off before spoilers. It ends very optimistically, at least for a horror book. It ends very optimistically. It has a very touching and sentimental ending, which I feel like is really nice. I really enjoyed, like, a heartwarming ending, and I do think he has some great moments between his characters in almost all of his books. The ending just kind of makes you feel like, you know, there are enough things taken away that makes it feel like a high stakes horror, but at the end, he can really pull on your heartstrings as well. One thing that I think this did really, really well, a lot of vampires tend to be like romance sort of novels, so like it's very rare, I feel like nowadays at least, to get a real horrifying vampire novel where the vampire isn't like a love interest. There's an attraction between Patricia and the vampire at first, but only because she feels so stuck in her lifestyle that this new dark mysterious stranger that is kind of giving her the time of day makes her feel things, and she even comments that it's the novelty of having someone care about her more than her role as a wife or a mother is really cool. I liked that. Personally, I do tend to feel a little grossed out when there are vampire romances. Like, it's something that, I mean, one of my guilty pleasure shows was The Vampire Diaries, so like I get it, but at the same time, like, if you really think deeply into it, it is very strange when a vampire, especially an old one, like 100-plus-year-old vampire, is into younger women. It's, if you think about it, it's kind of weird and predatory. I liked how this talked about that. There was sort of like a central element to the vampire, but it was in a weird way. It was very much stated that it was weird and predatory and just gross and horrifying at the same time. I thought that was really good. There is a lot of body horror in that, and I'd say it's the most jarring. There were some scenes with like animals in particular, so if you don't like that, there's like a scene where there is, I believe, a cockroach that crawls into Patricia's ear when she's hiding in an attic. I really hated that description, but it was really good. And then there was another one talking about just a swarm of rats, which I felt like was a really good Stephen King reference too. I'm sure you can kind of tell from his book cover designs and all of that, but Grady Hendrix is really into like the more meta horror. And while this one wasn't like the most elaborate in terms of setup, it was really meta. Like, it had references to Stephen King. In one of the very first chapters, Patricia's daughter is reading Salem's Lot, and we talk about classics. Like, they talk verbatim. The book club actually reads The Stranger Beside Me by Anne Rule and talks about other true crime books, which was really cool. And I really, really enjoyed that. Was, you know, the tagline in this book is, in every book we read, no one ever thought anything bad was happening until it was too late. So I really enjoyed like these 90s era murderinos. Especially Patricia, she realizes something's wrong right away. She has these warning signs, and they try and do something about it, but because of conventions at the time, and because who would believe in vampires because they're supposed to be mythical creatures, and then because they're just silly little housewives with too much time on their hands, no one believes them, which is really infuriating, but really sets up some conflict in this novel, because there's not a lot of time in this novel spent figuring out what James Harris, the vampire, is. You know, very early on, he's either a serial killer or a vampire, and based on the jacket of the book, you know he's going to be a vampire. They know something's off really early, and it's just a matter of fact of using that setting of the 90s in the South with these homemaker women that society just views them as lesser than someone, and they try and bring charges against him and call the cops on him, but because he is a white man in really good financial standing in the community, nothing's done about it. They don't take their word against it. So I thought that was really well done as well. If I'm not mistaken, this takes place in the same exact town as My Best Friend's Exorcism, which is really cool. I kind of forget a lot of details about the setting in My Best Friend's Exorcism, if I'm being honest, so I couldn't say how much it feels like the same town, just a couple years apart. So I feel like I might have to reread My Best Friend's Exorcism. I loved that book. I really loved this one, so I think it would be kind of fun to read back to back and see if that setting is really the same, because My Best Friend's Exorcism was set in the 80s. This is set in the 90s. So it's just a couple years apart, and I wonder how many, like, I bet there's like some side characters or something like that that appear in both of them. I wouldn't be surprised if that were a thing. So all in all, this was a really wonderful book. I'm glad I picked it up. Was just the perfect escapist read, and it kind of dipped my toe into horror, so it's not been something I've been reading, but I am gonna try and read more horror during this quarantine now, just because I feel like it is an escape, even though it's not the lightest of things, just because you're thinking of something else. So highly recommend this book. It is, you know, a perfect blend of horrifying, lighthearted, entertaining, funny, and it has such sweet touches to it that make it just a really wonderful book. So that is going to be the end of this video. If you liked it, please be sure to give it a thumbs up, leave a comment down below. Have you read this book already? Are you going to read it? You really should. Let me know your thoughts down below and subscribe for more content from me. I will catch you guys in my next video. Bye!